Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
All right, welcome back. We're getting ready to get the origin story of Doug Scheiding here in just a second. This portion of the show being brought to you by Smithfield Fresh Pork. Go to smithfield.com. Get tips and tricks from Chris Lilly, Ernest Cervantes, Darren Worth, and Childs Cridland. Some of the best pork money can buy. So head on over to smithfield.com and check out everything that they have going on. Without further ado, you know him, you love him. He is the longest-running embedded correspondent that I have here on the show, and he is none other than the pitmaster of Rogue Cookers, Doug Scheiding. Hey, Doug. Doug. Hello. Oh, Doug's punched out. Doug will be coming back in, no doubt. It's like the third guest. It always goes bad. Maybe I got to ditch this line.
I'm here.
All right, there you are.
You see me? I was here. I was like, I could hear you talking.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this line I got to get rid of. Who knows?
It goes back to like the first time I was on, sort of thing. You know, it's out of the memory
coming full
perspective.
circle. How about that? All right, Doug Scheiding joining me here on the show. So we're going to get Doug's origin story here, as I had mentioned. This will be a bonus hour or so. So we're recording, so if you can, you got to go to bed or whatever the case is, go ahead and do what you got to do. You can get this probably on Friday or Saturday as a special release. But obviously I wanted to knock out two of the three embedded correspondents. I don't actually have any goddamn idea, Doug, how we would have pulled off three embedded correspondents during this evening tonight. So I hate the fact that John had to miss tonight because of the circumstances, but this will certainly...
That's what I'm telling you. I was like...
Yeah, I don't know. Here we go, though. Doug Scheiding, where and when were you born?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I
Thank
can.
Goodness. Okay.
Yes, all right.
I was born... I feel like, you know, I'm on Barbara Walters and you're going to make me cry.
I hope so.
Or I'm Mariano Rivera and I'm the Sandman, you know, having to bring in the closer for the end of the night. But I was born in Lubbock, Texas. So I am a Texan. As we've discussed, I think in the past, you know, I've moved many times when I was young. So we were there for a few months and then we moved to San Antonio, but anyway, we moved quite a bit when I was young.
All right. So what was family life like for you as you were growing up prior to getting into high school?
Well, the Vietnam War that was in there. So Dad had volunteered. He was an instructor pilot in the Air Force, and he had volunteered, I think, in 66, 67. Right. You know, I was born in 66. So he volunteered to go over there right as I was born, and they didn't. He was an instructor pilot, so they kept him in his position until about 69, when he did go over to Vietnam, and so he did two tours over in Vietnam, 69 and 70. So I remember, you know, getting the little cassette tapes back because he would do the little cassette tapes and we would play it and I would be able to hear his voice and those sorts of things. And I remember going to Hawaii when he was on TDY from Vietnam to, you know, meet with us for a week and stuff. So I remember some of those things, and gosh, I would have been 4 years old or so. And you know, when we came, you know, when he came back in 70 or so, we went to Denver. But, you know, prior to that, we had been to Lubbock, San Antonio, Del Rio, Clovis, Fort Walton Beach, and back to Del Rio and then to Denver. But, you know, so when Dad came back from Vietnam, I'm told that he was kind of a changed person. So, cause he used to be a fun loving type person. And when he came back from Vietnam, he, you know, felt, it was during the time that, you know, it was kind of a hippie time, and he felt ashamed of what he had done and didn't feel like America, you know, serving for his country and stuff, and didn't feel like America really supported him when he came back. And so he was very reserved and really, you know, really didn't interact too much and didn't have much interaction. And so that kind of affected our relationship for a long long time. And so I had a closer relationship with my mother from, basically through most of growing up, and not my father.
Does he, I mean, this is a completely different time, but I ask because I wonder if it's available at that point. Was he somebody that, realized that he wasn't getting support from people around him, from general public? I mean, it's sad that he was ashamed of, what he was doing. I mean, was he ashamed because people were making him feel like that? Or did he just not agree with things that were going down that he was under command to do?
A little of both. I mean, when he walked off the tarmac, off the plane on the tarmac, someone, a hippie looking guy, walked in front of him and looked at him and then spit at him, as he's, coming back to America, And so, and when we went to Denver was very, loose, and kind of free. And, being military, you're part of the solution or part of the problem. And, for example, my first and second grades that I went to in Denver, they weren't called grades. They were called pods. And so, and there were no wrong answers to the questions and stuff. So like my dad still, they would have parent-teacher conferences and stuff. And so he'd ask the teacher, because they'd want us to go to the gully and count the number of trees on one side. He'd say, well, how many trees are there? Well, that's not it's about the process of counting the trees. And, one time he came to the school for another parent teacher conference, and then, there was a kid urinating on the outside of the building. And, we played in sandboxes and we did, all kinds of, it really wasn't a school. It was more like a giant play yard. My first
Montessori.
Yeah, kind of, but, a pod, who's ever heard of a pod? And, so, I made clay stuff. I played in the sandbox. I learned math by little sticks of, that were different lengths. And that's how we learned math, so it was very, outward thinking, forward thinking, very loose and wild and free. My first couple of years.
Does your dad ever look to go, seek any kind of self-help, realizing that he's not getting supported from general public and he's having his own demons from, doing whatever he had to do over there under command?
Yeah, no, he basically just buried himself into work. So he was in the Air Force. And so at that time, he went there and got his master's. And then we, from Denver, we moved to San Antonio. And so here he became an engineer, a structural engineer on the C5. And if anyone's interested, my dad has actually written a book about this because he didn't come back from Vietnam until 2009. And he wrote a book called The Long Return. And so actually, since he's written that book, and I've actually got him into some few clubs and stuff, he's actually much more gregarious now. So he's a totally different person. But he just buried himself into work, and so he was off doing work. My mom was actually a high school teacher, and so like Rusty said, from a latchkey stuff, I was a little bit of that. And, but my brother I actually had a brother, and he was born 7.5 years after me. And because of the Vietnam War, my mom didn't want, she didn't want to have a kid while dad was gone to Vietnam and have two kids. She just wanted to have one. So that's why there's so many years apart from us. But, in San Antonio, I just kind of did things with kids and stuff like that, and kept, tried to keep myself occupied because my parents were always working.
Was there another sibling aside from your younger brother then, or just you two?
No, just the two of us.
All right. So getting into high school, how do you remember that time? Are you into sports? Are you a good student? What's it like?
Well, we moved from San Antonio. We moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and I didn't really care too much about school, et cetera. But we moved to Montgomery, and my parents, specifically my mom, she wanted me to get into private school. So I had to take an IQ test. So I took an IQ test, and magically, I have no idea, I got into private school, and they wouldn't tell me what I scored or anything like that. And so I got into private school, and I'm like, I'm going to show these little private school kids that I can do something. And so I actually started, I was playing baseball there. I think we spent about 18 months or 24 months there. So I started playing baseball. My best friend, Charlie, his dad was the coach. And so played baseball on his team and stuff. And so then I kind of started feeling competitive, and that's where I got some of my competitive, juices. I also started playing tennis there, and, they kept score in terms of the grades and how you did and that sort of stuff. And so I started being competitive, and so I wanted to do better than those rich kids that were there, and so that actually kind of formed me and affected me from that standpoint. So and we spent 2 years there. My parents actually moved before the school year was over, and I stayed with my buddy Charlie, and I was on the state team from Montgomery, and we lost in the finals of the state championship, to go to the World Series and stuff. But I was a pitcher and played third base and also outfield, and had a good time. I really liked it.
Did you have any aspirations or was there any collegiate talk at that point? I mean, that's a pretty high level team you're on.
Yeah, there was some talk, but I moved, and my parents moved back to Clovis, New Mexico. I found it interesting. Derek mentioned Clovis. I'm like, Clovis, yes, yeah. So that was our second time back to Clovis. So so my parents moved, and one of the things that it's weird, the small things that kind of affect you as a kid, right? But they moved, and I had a coin collection. And my dad cashed in my coin collection as regular coins when they purchased the house, because I wasn't there and stuff. So then I was like, okay, I'm not collecting anything the rest of my life. I'm not doing anything. And so, I got back. I'm like, what do you mean you cashed in my coin collection and stuff? And so that actually affected my relationship with my dad for a few years from that. But when I moved to Clovis, I decided to give up baseball and just go tennis full time. And so that, and we Clovis is a small town, 35,000. That was eighth, ninth grade, I was an outsider because I was military, and, moving into a town, there was, sections, you're military. And then there were like, the cool kids that were there, part of the town and sort of thing. So, but because I played tennis, I actually got in with some of the more popular kids, and that were, well known and so actually, started kind of moving up, if you will, and getting in with the cool crowd.
What year are you in high school?
I was in high school, let's say from 80 to 84 or 81 to 84. Okay. So, and, back in the Hair Nation days, that's why, I had a Hair Nation, a little bit of a mullet, and so I was in an air band in high school as well. So
many people,
yeah.
So I would assume you're a fairly decent student as well.
Yeah, when I went to that private school, I decided that I was going to be a good student. And that actually won me favor with my parents. And so that was kind of like the approval. The bar was always set up this high for me, and, always trying to get approval from them, and being the firstborn, et cetera. So actually in high school, I was the valedictorian.
Oh, wow.
But and I had the highest, I had above a 4 GPA because I took AP classes and stuff like that. But, a little bit of politics. Even though I was a tennis player and on student council and stuff like that, there were 3 of us that had above a 4.0, but I had the highest. They didn't have me speak as valedictorian or anything like that. They had the student body president speak, and so none of the 3 of us spoke. But it was okay. He was my doubles tennis partner, and I actually wound up playing football at Baylor and stuff like that. So he was a good friend, good athlete, and stuff like that. But high school was. Was a lot of fun. Played tennis. Never got to go to prom because I was always playing state in tennis. Wound up my senior year, I was fourth in the state.
Wow.
in tennis, and at that time I was thinking about going to college and playing D1 type tennis and stuff. But I had a full ride at New Mexico State.
Okay, I was gonna say, were you getting offered?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a full ride at New Mexico State. But my goal in high school was, basically coming out of high school was to be a day's drive away from my parents. I wanted to be 8 hours away. I didn't want them popping in on me. And so I turned down New Mexico State. I turned down Texas Tech. They offered me a small scholarship, and I was Texas A&M. I remember watching them on football, on TV and stuff. And I'm like, I want to go to A&M. Plus, I know you've asked, this is probably one of your questions and stuff, but my dad being an Air Force pilot, he flew F-111s in Clovis. I love planes. I've always loved planes. I always loved, flying Braniff, back when that was big.
Right.
And he was an aerospace engineer. And so I took all the, what is it, the Myers-Briggs test? Is it the Myers-Briggs or whatever those tests are that says, kind of what your personality is and, how it matches with other people in different industries and stuff like that. Engineering was mechanical engineering and other types of engineering were, probably 5 or 6 of the top 10 that I matched with.
Wow.
And so I debated going mechanical engineering or aerospace. And I made up my mind I was going aerospace, and A&M had one of the top 10 aerospace schools in the country as well. So I said, okay, I'm going to A&M.
Wow. And
so I knew 2 people at A&M. One was my cousin, and the other one was another guy from Clovis High School, which I didn't like. So it was just going to be a new beginning for me.
Yeah.
And so I took it that way.
We've cursorily covered this, many moons ago, but as you're moving around, how does that affect you? I mean, you're a little kid, you're moving around, you're middle school, you're moving around, and high school, you're moving around. I mean, usually when transfers happen in high school, I mean, that's a real big deal for a lot of parents where, if they're going, and I was one of those kids that moved, it was the middle of 6th grade. And, I'm sure there was a lot of talk between my parent. I'm not privy to any of that talk, but I'm sure there was a lot of talk.
That was your first and only move? That was your first
we had
and only
moved
move
when I was younger, and it was like, nothing that I really remember. Like, I recall living like Saratoga. I mean, I knew, I have like some memories of horse heads and one weird memory of getting locked out of an apartment in Henrietta Highlands, but I mean, way, way young. Right. Saratoga. So the big move for me was from New York to Cleveland. And, here I've stayed ever since, and my parents have since moved down to Florida back in 97. But, it was one move. It was 6th grade, and I fear that I remember my dad recounting a story saying, in the middle of high school, he had an offer to transfer to Florida at some point. And, it was never even mentioned. They just, passed on it. They weren't going to pull us out of high school because of how it could affect us and or what it would have effect wise on us. And so I wonder, as somebody who just moved constantly, I mean, more than anybody that I ever know, how does that realistically affect you every time? And then more importantly, how is that building a personality of Doug Scheiding as a youth?
Yeah. So we moved 12 times between, when I was born, and then, when I graduated from college. As I think I've mentioned before, I was more of an introvert and, occupied myself with, back then the handheld video games and, I'd make up stuff, games to play in my room and stuff. But, I had trouble having long-term relationships. And, so I would develop maybe 1, maybe 2 relationships at each place. and not really care about making friends with other people. And that carried over for a long period in my time, and still does to a certain extent, So sometimes when I go to parties, I kind of revert back to my old ways, and I'm like, who am I going to know here, and why do I want to talk to these people? Because I'm never going to see them again. And so that's kind of my attitude going in, or at least it used to be.
Yeah.
But now, heck, I can talk barbecue with anybody. A lot of people want to talk barbecue. So, but when I got out of high school, I was more of an introvert. When I took the test, I was on the introvert side as compared to extrovert. So I'm probably gone the other way.
Were you always thinking that, so if you made those two relationships, were you always just waiting to hear that this week is the week that we're going to learn that we're going to be moving again?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, I went through junior high and high school kind of fearing that as well, because my dad was given the choice when we moved from Montgomery to go to England, because it had been a while since he had been overseas. I guess you have to go overseas so often and stuff. And so, or Clovis, New Mexico. Clovis was considered remote duty.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of stinking nowhere. And, it's right over the Texas border, kind of a triangle with Lubbock and Amarillo, basically. So Clovis was 9 miles over. In the end, that was actually, I consider Clovis my home. I went to high school there, and several times we wound up staying there for a little over 6 years. I guess my parents were there for 8. But it was because my dad kept going up, and, he was a pilot, then he was a instructor pilot, then he was a squadron command, he kept moving up the chain there. So they allowed him to stay there. And so it was actually very beneficial for me, because I did develop a lot of relationship in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, anyway, so yeah, I developed a lot of relationships with guy friends, but girls, I never, and we'll get into this with my wife, but I never had a relationship longer than 3 months, even in high school and in the first few years of college.
So you get into A&M, I assume you're choosing the aerospace engineering major, which is like an incredibly lofty and academic major, no doubt about it. So how does college unfold for you?
I actually, my mom encouraged me. I had tested out of a few classes. My mom encouraged me. She goes, go ahead and take them and get the easy A. I'm like, okay. So, I'm like, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Even though I had clept out of them and stuff. And so, my first year, I had goals. I had big goals. I wanted to learn how to play quarters, and make, the game quarters.
The drinking game?
Yes.
Yes.
This is my big goal.
Do I know?
Yeah.
I think I was a master.
All right, so there you go.
Oh my Lord.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could shoot a quarter 5 different ways.
Wow.
And I could make it. I mean, my best way was off my nose, right? You saw the jerks that did it off their nose. I could make it into like a beer can into the opening so many times. Wow. And so then people would, make the rule, depending on the table, and then they'd make the rule, well, you can't shoot off your nose. Well, so then I could shoot it out my mouth. I could shoot it off, like a gun. I could shoot it from the front, and then I could bounce it from the side. And so we would practice quarters all the time.
Wow.
And so that I drank a few Cokes that year.
How does that reflect in your grades?
That is funny. I made 2 B's that semester. One was in English, which I thought, my mom was an English teacher, when I was growing up. So I thought I was a literary genius. I found out when I went to college, I wasn't quite so good in English as I thought I was.
Yeah.
And my first grade in English was a D. And I went and talked to that professor every time there was a paper and talked to him about what I did wrong in the paper. So I wound up with a B in English and a B in, I think it was physics. And I'm not sure they gave any A's in that physics class. And in fact, I think I had a 35 average going into the final, and I pulled, and I didn't even study for it. And I pulled because I could guess get a 35, and I didn't even study for it except for the last 2 days before the final, and I got a 40, and that raised my grade to a B.
Wow!
They curved it that much, and the professor was never there and stuff, and so, but so I made those 2 Bs, and then the next year I pledged a fraternity. And the busier I got, the better I did. I made a 4.0 the next year, and my roommate made a 0.6, I think it was. We were out till 2 a.m, having lineups and all that stuff. Not that that ever happened, but we had that kind of stuff, and the busier I was, the better I did. So then that's when I really started applying my freshman year. I just kind of jacked around. And, I gained my 16 pounds my freshman year since I wasn't playing tennis, because I actually was promised a spot on the A&M tennis team. And that's when I learned about the world of politics.
Uh-huh.
I went through a 64-man draw. I wasn't even supposed to, have to go through a draw. So we went through it. I lost to a junior college transfer, 6'4" in the finals. And he had played 2 years in junior college. And so he got the right to play a guy on the top, on the team. He played the number 5 guy, almost beat him.
Wow.
And I'm like, geez, I can play on the team. And the coach Kent goes, y'all did good. He goes, but I have 8 South African players, and I'm only supposed to have 6 on scholarship this year. So come out next year. You're really good. We'll have you out next year. And I'm like, see ya. And so I played intramurals. I think I lost in the semis and intramurals and won the doubles and intramurals and stuff. And then I just gave up tennis. So I was like, forget it. So it worked out in the end because I had a lot more time to practice quarters and stuff my freshman year.
Important.
And then starting my sophomore year, that's when the education kind of kicked in, where it was kind of hard, much harder. But I did better. I got a 4.0, and then so that was my first one. And then I was like, okay. Then I became driven. I was going to be the best in my class.
How does college finish up then?
I finished number 1 in my class.
Wow.
I made 3 Bs. I made 1 other B, and that was on a team project, and some douchebag didn't do his part, and his part didn't work. Yeah, right. To use your terms, I'm quoting.
Yes.
I'm using air quotes, douchebag. So anyway, I finished with a 3.94 or something like that.
Wow.
And number 1 in my class. And I actually was selected as the top aerospace student in the nation that year.
Really?
Yeah, I was.
Holy
Yeah,
moly. In the nation?
Yeah.
Wow.
In the nation.
So
by the AIAA.
Being the number 1 coming out, what does that afford you? Do you have job offers coming out? Were you interning during your college years? So you had already made inroads. I mean, this is pretty high level stuff.
Yeah, because we moved in the summers, I really didn't get to intern except I was 4.5 year plan. So my last half semester, I set it up that I was taking 12 hours, and I call it my victory lap, because I had psychology, sociology, easy stuff, and so I traveled the nation that semester and just interviewed. And because I always had my mindset that I was going to work for General Dynamics. I love the F-16. That's one of my favorite planes. And even though it's a single engine plane, I just love that plane. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I went to Boeing. I went to Lockheed Martin. I went to E3. I went to NASA, and this was a little scandalous. There was a 2-day interview set up, with, various departments down there and stuff. And so I left after the first 3 hours.
Wow.
And they said, what do you mean you're leaving? And I said, I'm leaving. I'm having someone come pick me up, because the people had not even read my resume when I went into the interview. And I'm like, okay, they're just a little Congress mandates that you have to have 50 people for this job, and they just want people in there, and then you're a little checkbox. And I'm like, that's not what I'm after. And so it was during this interview process that I really kind of understood I wasn't going to fit in a large organization. And, Boeing, they have the totem pole, and you weren't necessarily totally promoted based on the job you did and everything. I'm like, okay, so you're out. And General Dynamics, I interviewed for black, they call them the security, they call them black programs.
Yep.
Where you couldn't really, go inside. And so I, interviewed in the lobby of General Dynamics, and I'm like, they offered me cool things that they were going to tell me to do, but they really couldn't tell me what I was going to do. So I said, okay, you're out. And so I basically went around the country interviewing at different places and stuff. And so I narrowed it down to 3, and one was the Exxon management program, but it was in New Orleans, and I wasn't real wild about living in New Orleans. And then the next one was E3, which did some things kind of related to satellites. And see, I love planes, but I hate satellites. I mean, I have no desire to go to the moon and get in a satellite and, no oxygen, forget that. So, and then the last one, the only internship I did was the summer before my victory lap or victory semester. And I worked for a little small company, and in aerospace, we did something called, it's called finite element analysis. Basically, it's computer simulation. So, you take a structure and you divide it up into real small mathematically predictable elements. And then you put them all together and then subject them to whatever stress that they're going to go over, like when they're flying. So on the wings, the stress of the air, the air going over the wings and how that pushes up and those sorts of things. And you can do that on the computer. So that's what I liked when I was in college. And so I said, that's what I'm going to do when I get out. And so when I worked for this company here in San Antonio, he said, come and see me the last. And I'm like, okay, I'll come and see you. And so I told him, hey, I think I'm going to go with Exxon because they were offering the most money. And I was going to do a management program where you do 6, 6, 6, and 6, 6 months here and in different programs. And so it was a management track to go up within Exxon. And he said, okay, he goes, what are they offering you? And I said, I don't know, I think about 35,000 or so. He goes, okay, I'll do that plus five. So that was 40,000 back in, the 88 or so. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so he goes, and you'll be able to do your own, your computer simulation. I've got a project for you to do right away, and you'll be your own boss. And so it was him, someone else, and his wife did like the bookkeeping and stuff. So I started there and wound up staying there for 10 years, and grew it from 3 people to 19 people. And we did software sales. We did software consulting. I was in charge of consulting. And then I was also in charge of the sales. So I would hire salespeople, they'd leave, and then I'd go and sell some. And then I'd go back to doing consulting, because, I got a little tired of being in front of the computer. Back then the fax was really cool. Yeah. That was really neat. I'd start a job, the 386, 486 was big. So I'd start a job like at 10 at night. We'd have to live close to work. So I'd go back in at 2 or 3 just to see if it would be working, and that I didn't have some programming error and stuff. And so we lived real close and stuff. But I got a little tired of that. And so I did more of the sales and stuff. And so, but anyway, long story. But I interviewed with him last. He matched it plus 5,000. I got to do whatever the heck I wanted to, which kind of goes, with what I like to do now, is whatever the hell I want to. And I took that. And so it was formative from the standpoint of, I've always worked for small companies, and I just like to, to be in charge of my own self and not have, multi layers of management on top of me.
So you're out of college, you have a job that you're there for 10 years. Yep. Where does a Mrs. Doug Scheiding make an appearance? And tell us how that love story happened.
Miss Jen. I always envisioned, and maybe this is because my mom had envisioned this for me, is marrying a sweet, sorority type girl, and prim and proper, etc. So, but that's not who my wife is, and my wife is awesome. She is a tomboy, and I was walking across campus, and she walks by. An A&M is a pretty conservative campus. Aggies and stuff, the Corps of Cadets and, very conservative. She walks by and says, "Hey, Doug." And I'm walking with my best friend who I pledged the fraternity with, David Sperlin. I'll see him this weekend. I looked and I literally kicked him in the ass. I said, "Who the hell was that?" And she's walking barefooted, right? I'm like, "Who is that?" It's pretty noticeable. Well, come to find out, she had seen me at a fraternity party early in the semester, our junior year. And she had gone with a guy that was trying to pledge our fraternity. And I had a date for that one, for that particular event. But I had asked her the night before, after I had had a few Cokes, and it was kind of dark and stuff. And so I went and picked her up, and she had all this makeup on. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work out. We just both kind of knew this isn't going to, it's like, so anyway, so it's like someone to hit me in the candelabra and I didn't know who it was that I was going out with. And so anyway, so I was basically by myself. Well, they were playing the rules wrong on the roulette table. So I was winning money at the roulette table every time. And I was totally sober and I was cheering and doing all this. My wife saw my name tag, Doug, and she recognized me when she saw me like a couple of days later. and so then I saw her like, let's say maybe a week or two later, and at the post office. And so I walked her to class, and I was late to my engineering class, which I'm never late to my engineering class. And so then I saw her. I was trying to get away from this girl. And so she was actually laying out in a 2-piece bikini, and she called my name, and I went over and started talking to her. I asked her, I said, "Okay, let's go will you go with me to a football game?" If a girl says yes to a football game at A&M,
yes,
you're in. Okay. You're in. Because here's why. Because if you really like her, you'll ask her to Friday the midnight yell. At A&M, we have a midnight yell practice for home games before the football game on Saturday. Midnight, you have a midnight yell.
It's like a pep rally.
Yes, it's like a pep rally, right. But it's held in the football stadium, and like 30,000 people go to it. So I didn't ask her to go to that. I just asked her to go to the football game. But it doesn't matter, because if she goes to the football game, you're in, because you get to score, you get to kiss every time the football team scores. See, when A&M sucked, wow. you would kiss on every first down. So
the rules are changing so you can make out.
Oh, absolutely. Nice. So the game we went to, and it was very romantic. It was me and 7 other guys, because I was pledge trainer, and Jennifer. Oh, but she was like, no, it was actually great, because she knew football. She was like predicting some of the plays. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. And it wound up being the game of the decade for the Southwest Conference in the 80s. And it was against Baylor. We won 35-32. So needless to say, we got a few smooches in on that first date. So it was actually 34 years ago, October 18th. We just celebrated our anniversary last week.
Right, look at you.
Of our first date. Nice. Yes. So that was our romantic first date. Yeah. But she didn't call me back for like 2 weeks. She wasn't calling me back. I'd call and leave a message and stuff. Okay. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, yeah.
I thought you meant like she wasn't calling you back and you were just like ghosting.
Oh, no.
You were following up. You were doing your due diligence.
I followed up a couple of times. Yeah. And, didn't want to act too interested. And then she wasn't returning, wasn't really calling me back that much, at all. And so I had a pledge this is kind of the way my mind thinks. It's kind of weird sometimes. So I had a pledge that was getting my signature. So we were driving around, and so we went and found a wood pile because at that time she had a squirrel. My future wife had a pet squirrel
in her room.
And so yes.
Weird.
And so I told you she was very liberal.
Yeah.
And so, walking around, no shoes and stuff, she had this squirrel. It would be in her backpack and it would go and crawl around and stuff like that. Oh yeah. So I was like, okay. She won't call me back. Right. So I said, okay. So we went and got 2 logs. Hey, this is kind of interesting, kind of a barbecue story. So got 2 sticks of wood, the big sticks with bark. I put a there and I put a card in there for her to give me a call. She wasn't in, because the dorms and stuff, they're all locked and stuff. This is back, when everything was real conservative. So anyways, I just started dialing people in and finally got a hold of someone. I said, hey, come down, pick this up and give this to Jennifer when she comes in. And so they came down, and then, as the story goes, when Jennifer came home, they called her and like, we've got something for you, but we're not sure what it is. It's 2 pieces of wood and a rose and a card in a paper bag. She called me the next day.
Nice.
So it worked. And so, yeah, we dated for a while and off and on. And, I still had the detachment disorder going on. And so that was, October. And so we were dating and I'd be hot, I'd be cold. And so finally, right before spring break, I'm headed to a test. She meets me on my way to my test, my last test before spring break. And she goes, I'm not putting up with this shit. You're off and on. And so she goes, we're done. We're not, and I'm going and having fun on my spring break. I'm like, okay. And so I was late to the test, had to be all the way in the back of the class and, was thinking about it and stuff. But, so finished the test, was going with some buddies, South Padre was the place to go when we were in college. And so we went to South Padre. I had been to South Padre many years and stuff. And so after a couple, 2-3 days, I couldn't scam. I didn't want to scam. I was like, what the hell is she doing? Where is she? And so we stayed at this flea bag hotel, the Sands Motel. Literally, this is payphone time, right? Payphone.
Yeah.
So I was using the payphone at the Sands Motel in Brownsville, Texas, outside of South Padre. And the owners felt so sorry for me. They were actually bringing me tacos. So I knew she was staying at her friend's house in McAllen. So I started calling the Choppas in McAllen to find her. Luckily, Arturo Choppa starts with an A, and I found where she was staying in McAllen. I said, let's talk when we get back. And so we did, cried like a baby. She forgave me. And then ever since then, we've been together.
And no hot and cold after that.
Negative.
Yeah.
Negative. Right. I got over it. So no, she finally put the screws to me, and she was just the independent woman that I needed.
Yeah.
Needed to really kind of put me in my place.
So you guys are married like after you get out of college then?
Yeah. We waited till we were both 23. We waited till I graduated in the, say December of 88. We married July 1st of 89.
All right.
Is when we married, which was her parents' 27th year anniversary, by the way. So
share date. Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She didn't, when I asked her to get engaged, I heard Rusty's kind of story and stuff like that. Jennifer was not like that at all. I actually had to surprise her. So when I worked at that company, the semester before my victory lap, I worked a ton. I'd work 18 hours and pay me by the hour. And so I saved up enough money, and I had friends that were Jewish who had a family member that owned a place in New York, a diamond place in New York. And so I got the diamond, mounted it, and then I went up there to her parents, and then I had a limo pull up to her house, and her mom's like, you know what's happening? You know what's happening? And she's like, he can't afford it. He can't afford it. He can't afford it. So we took a limo from from Waco to go to A&M. And everyone always gets engaged under the Century Tree, but I wanted to get engaged under Bell Tower. And, people drive around and honk and stuff. And so we got engaged there. And then actually happened to be the same limo driver that we had for our wedding.
Really?
So yeah, it's kind of a weird story.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a weird story. So, but anyway, So I definitely surprised her with asking her to marry me, because she didn't think I could afford a diamond ring.
Where are you guys living out of college?
We moved to San Antonio, where I had done the internship and took that job there. She was actually working in Waco, so she lived in Waco until we got married, and then came down here and stuff. And one of the there are moments that kind of you remember and stuff. So when I was moving into my apartment out of my parents' house and stuff, and this is probably 2 or 3 months before we got married and stuff, and my parents, because number one, I was marrying a Catholic. That's a wrong religion. So she had horns, and and my wife came from the wrong socioeconomic status. I mean, we were middle class. My wife was poor, from a poor family and stuff. And so my parents actually, mainly my mom, was against me marrying her. Oh. And so when I was moving out, they refused to lift a finger. And we had already kind of had some problems with my parents before then, because like in college, I had wrecked my car, and I was looking for a car, and I told them I was going to buy a Camaro, and they said, you're going to buy this Camaro. And I said, or you're not going to buy this Camaro. And I said, no, I'm going to buy that Camaro. And so they told me no. And I said, okay. And so the next day I went and bought the damn Camaro. Yeah. And so we were always, I was already kind of having some problems back then. And so anyway, they didn't lift a finger, and they almost didn't come to our wedding, by the way, because because I didn't ask my brother to be in the wedding. And I said, no, I'm not close enough to him. He's not going to be in the wedding. And then, so I actually had to call him to the carpet. I said, okay, we're about to print the invitations, and if you are not coming to the wedding, your name is not on the invitation. Yeah. And so then they decided that they were going to come to the wedding.
Were you always distant from your brother then? Was it more like because of the age? You guys just didn't have that much in common, or what?
Yeah. He was diagnosed, and was probably overdiagnosed, but I think he was with the ADHD, the attention deficit hyperactive disorder. But I mean, when he would ride his little rocking horse, he would ride it to go up and down. When he went to sleep, he would bounce his head on the pillow and stuff. He had, there is something different about him. And so, 7.5 years, we never really bonded too much and stuff, and stuff. And unfortunately, he got in drugs, and and there was nothing really I could do about it. He hung out with a bad guy. I hung out with bad kids when I was in 3rd and 4th grade. He hung out with bad kids when he was in high school. Yeah. So there's a difference there. Yeah. So and so unfortunately, I've never really been close to him.
Has he cleaned up his act since then, or is he still involved?
No, he's in prison.
He's in prison?
He's in prison.
For drug use, or was he in crime? To
it's interesting.
Support the habit.
Today I was trying to figure out what the latest charge was that he was in. And I was going on these public records and stuff like that. And they wanted, sign your up and $14. And screw that. The last thing I know that he did was, he robbed a lady with a knife. He had a knife. And so it's, aggravated a robbery with a deadly weapon or something like that. Yeah, sure. And, with his, he had all kinds of drug arrests, and he robbed a bank once. and, paid a guy, to take him away. And, he was in jail for something else, and the Fed came and said, we've got you on video. And so he'd, finished one term and went to another. He has a terrible, terrible alcohol problem. And when, one of the times when he was out, he lived close to me, and I went over there because he called me, and, when he gets drunk, he would call and stuff. And so I went over there. And have you heard of the drug called antabuse?
No.
Okay. So antabuse is a drug where if you drink, it makes you sick.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah.
So anyway, so I went over there. He had an 18 pack by him, and he had a bucket in front of him.
Oh.
And he would drink.
Wowee.
Use the bucket and drink more.
Yeah.
And he told me, I'm going to drink this. And before then, because I'm always a mind over matter kind of guy, I was like, that's it. I mean, he cannot control it. He cannot control it. And so he's always had an addiction problem to many things and stuff. So he's still in, and so hopefully he's going to get it approved by the judge for this latest time, because he's been in for like 11 years.
Whoa!
Been out a few times, gotten out.
Parole
always lasts about
whatnot.
60 days. Yeah, and always lasts about 60 days, and then has to have an issue, and stuff, and gets thrown back in. So he's supposed to get approved by the judge to be on a year-long program to go into, and hopefully he'll get sober. Hopefully he will.
Do you ever feel like there was any responsibility on you to help him at all, or because or were you insulated by the time gap where, there wasn't a close bond necessarily in the beginning, where you felt like, I need to help him, or, there's something I should have done?
I tried to help him.
Yeah.
And in fact, I told the guy, Adam, which is the guy that got him hooked on drugs in high school, to stay away from him. And I told my brother to stay away from him, wouldn't stay away from him.
Yeah.
And, the bar was always set like this for me. The bar for my brother, because he had ADHD, was set down low.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. And I even, didn't talk to my parents for 18 months one time, because I told them they were enabling him. And they didn't want to hear it. And so I said, okay, when you can have a conversation like an adult, give me a call back. And it was 18 months later.
Yeah.
So I'm a little strong. So
at what point does live fire making it? I mean, so I guess let me back out of that. I mean, as you've lived in Texas, I mean, I would assume exposure is great to, all different kinds of barbecue, but you're a successful aerospace engineer, which you're not an aerospace engineer at this point, and we'll talk about the professional transition and how that happens, because I would assume that once you're a aerospace engineer, like, that's something everybody would want to do and stay in forever, blah, blah, blah. But where does live fire start to mix into all of this and start to pique your interest?
Live fire. I need to get a charger. I hate to do this.
Doug's leaving the show, everybody. Come back tomorrow for part 2. I wish I would have downloaded the pictures of the chori pollo.
It was about to go out.
Last night. I did have chori pollo last night. That's right. I had it last night, believe it or not. Free guacamole for everybody. Half off margaritas. That's right. All right. He's back.
All right. Sorry. My computer was about to run out.
Yeah.
So my wife is an incredible cook. She's a natural cook. And I never cooked. When I was growing up, my mother made kind of 3 dishes: chicken with rice that I'd usually have to put it in the oven because she was working. I'd, get home by myself. And then after tennis, goulash and shepherd's pie. I eat none of those to this day because I ate it all the damn time.
Right.
My dad would do steaks, pork chops. And I got to thinking about this. I ate a lot of hot dogs, which kind of goes back to my hatred of hot dogs. So But I did for myself, the master chef that I was when I was growing up in high school, as well as when we got married. I made a lot of nachos, salads, and that's what I would eat all the time. My motto used to be, if it took longer to make than eat, it wasn't worth the time. Wasn't worth the time. And so I was microwave boy. And so my wife would, do stuff after college, I actually took up tennis again. So, being competitive and stuff, I started playing again, and there was a guy in town that pissed me off. And I said, okay, I'm going to get a team and we're going to beat your ass every year. And so we beat his team 10 out of 11 years after I got out of college. And so we actually, I got to play at Flushing Meadow and stuff. And, nice. So the point of the matter is, when I do something, I do it 150%. And that's just the way I am. So when I got into cooking, and so in 2009, a neighbor of mine asked me I did grilling and stuff, on a Weber and, a little bit of that. And I had a Weber Smoky Mountain that I cooked on. I hated it. I actually gave it away after 3 cooks. I hated the water pan. I hated that stupid thing. So
you didn't need to
in 2009,
You didn't need to use it.
Well, I tried using it and I hated it. You couldn't get to the charcoal. They needed a door on the bottom and you had to move the water pan. I'm like, this is stupid design. Hated the design. So I gave it away.
You take the whole thing off the charcoal bowl.
Yeah, that just was too much. I was like, just put a damn door down there. I almost cut it myself. But anyway, so, a neighbor of mine kind of getting into barbecue, a neighbor of mine asked me to be in a charity event in September 2009. And so I said, I saw him I'm like, yeah, let me think about that, not intending to ever do anything. And then I saw him, it was one of the barbecue stars or something with Chris Lilly, and he was on TV and and a contest and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I'll do that once. I'll do it once. And so I called my neighbor back and I said, hey, you got a grill? And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, I'll borrow a friend of mine's grill and we'll go do this. And so we practiced, and he was OCD type A, I'm OCD type A. And so we practiced, and he lived, I could walk to his house. He's probably, I don't know, 2 acres that way. So maybe 400 yards. So anyway, so I could walk to his house. And so we had the grill out there. And so we practiced and stuff. And then we went to that first contest, and there were 53 teams, and, it was at this big venue. They were going to have like 4,000 or 5,000 people there and stuff. And so they had the calls. This is the only event I've ever been to. They had the calls of 4 through 10 at offsite, kind of before the awards ceremony, because they didn't want to bore the 2,000 or 3,000 people that were going to be there,
right?
Announcing these other. So, and we got in Chef's Choice, only like 11 people entered, and we got like 9. His wife got 9th, and we're like, God, this sucks. So we're smoking cigars, drinking beer when they're doing awards, and we're like, we're not even going to go to awards, and it was probably 100 feet away, and so we're like, okay, we'll go to awards, and so lo and behold, they called the second for ribs, which were his, and third for brisket, which was mine, and we got 2 gold belt buckles.
Wow.
And we finished 3rd overall, barely missed reserve grand champion, and beat all 3 barbecue restaurants in town and stuff that were in, because at the time there were only that many. And so then we started cooking together. So that's kind of how I got the bug of cooking and stuff. And so I just, researched the hell out of it and started practicing and reading a bunch of books.
What was the team at that point?
Flameworthy Barbecue. Barbecue.
All right. You've recently told this story before, so maybe I'll give the Cliff Notes version here. But you end up doing a competition without your co-pitmaster, and
San Antonio Rodeo.
There was some agreement made where you were going to cook a certain recipe for the brisket. But in game time, the team recipe. But in crunch time, you throw caution to the wind. You cook Doug's recipe, and did Did you?
Not exactly true. I cooked 4 briskets. I cooked 3 the team way, and I cooked 1 my way, which 2 years before had gotten 4th place at the San Antonio Rodeo out of 300 teams.
But you're turning in Doug's brisket.
I decided. His wife decided,
right.
Even though he wasn't there, and my wife. Right. We all said that was the best one.
And
so that is totally correct.
How do you finish in that competition?
We wound up getting 16th in chicken, 2nd in brisket, and 4th overall. If I had gotten stinking 1st in brisket, I'd have been reserve grand champion. But anyway,
all right.
So yeah,
we're not harboring any bad feelings.
No. Yeah.
So great news. 2nd in brisket. You get to this guy's house after he gets back in town. He's out of town for whatever reason, and he, I guess, gives you some kind of adulation, but then also tells you that you have more or less disgraced the team. You didn't cook the agreed upon recipe. And by doing that, you've also eliminated yourself from the team because you went rogue and cooked and turned in your brisket.
He pointed his finger at me. He said that when the coach tells you to bunt, and you swing for the fences, sometimes you hit a home run, and you did. But when you made the rogue decision to cook your own recipe is when you decided you're no longer part of the team.
Wow. And that was it. He kicked you off the team, and away you go.
You kicked me off the team.
Yeah.
I said I'd have respected you as a man if we would have talked about it face to face. He said, we're talking about it right now. I said, no, Clint, you are lecturing me. And he's a speaker. But by that's his occupation. I said, no, you are lecturing me. Jennifer, get your shit. We're gone. So
if he would have, so are you saying that if you guys would have showed up at his house and he would have said, hey, let's talk about the 2nd place brisket. I thought we agreed that you were going to turn it in. And, I understand that you did well. And my wife and your wife also taste tested. And this was the right one to turn in. But man, as well as I did, that wasn't what you were supposed to do. So, I just can't have you on the team anymore. Would that have gone over any better? Or if he would have been like, hey, Doug, come on over. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be kicking you off the team. And we'll have a brief discussion.
That's kind of the way it was, because I was giving him, I gave him almost all the trophies. If there was a trophy that I wanted, we just got a duplicate made. So, but, if we would have talked about it a little bit, I think, he was telling me that was the way it was. And, he wasn't the damn chief cook that day. I was.
Yeah.
He wasn't there. I'm the damn chief cook. There's only one chief cook. And I was there. I was doing it. That was my last cook on an offset. I had a phone on my chest, and every 20 minutes it would go off, and I'd go check the gator pit that we had, which was his. I'd go check it and say, okay, this is the piece of wood that I need to put on there, and I'd put it on there. And I did that every 20 minutes till 4 a.m.
Oof.
And then as my wife so greatly pointed out to me that she took it over from 4 to 6 so I could get 2 hours of sleep that day.
Yeah. So you can be sharp for turn-ins. Wow.
Yeah. For some reason, I keep forgetting that part of the story, but she reminds me all the time.
Do you think that he was just overtly jealous and didn't know how to cope? Or do you think do you think he had a right to part your company?
Here's the thing. It was for the San Antonio Rodeo. There's a rodeo barbecue, right? He's on the executive top committee of the rodeo. And I told him when I had a few Cokes on that Saturday night and he called me, I said, they're going to give you a lot of shit because we did so well and you weren't here. And then I actually told him that night that I didn't cook. I cooked 1 my recipe and 3 the team recipe, and it was better and stuff. And so he had some time to plan it out and stuff. But he type A personalities and stuff. And so have I lost you?
Yeah, you're back now. I'm sorry.
Okay,
both type A personalities.
So, type A personalities and stuff. And he's actually done really well off on his own, and it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me from a barbecue standpoint.
As you progress now as rogue cookers, how does Traeger avail itself? How does working with Head Country avail itself? It's all really name brand stuff in the industry.
Right. So, this was 2014 when I started cooking by myself, January of 2014. My first cook-off on a Traeger, which I bought at a kiosk in the mall. I figured, heck, $1,000. They were the first one. I'll buy it. It can't be, I'll sell it on Craigslist if I don't know. My first cook-off, it was one of the Western Wood,
Yep.
chunks, series and stuff. So they had a series of 3 of them and stuff. My first one, I cooked it on barrels. Wind blew 30 miles an hour. White smoke, billow smoke, tastes like charcoal. I said, that'll never happen again. Bought a Traeger. The next contest, because it was a series of 3 and 3 cook-offs. The next one I finished, I don't know, it was like 14th in ribs and 16th in brisket out of 150, 160 teams or so. I'm like, shoot, I can do this. This will work. Pellet cookers will work. And I think I was the first one to cook on pellet cookers exclusively in Texas, best I know. So I was like, this is fine. Even though I staggered it on one pit, I cooked chicken ribs and brisket on one pit. A little Texas, or a Pro 34, if you know the Pro 34, it was the precursor to that. And so the next cook-off I did pretty well too, and I wound up finishing in the top, I don't know, 3rd or 25%, even though I stunk in that first one. And so that's when I started cooking on Traegers. And so the first year at the Houston Rodeo, I think I got got asked to cook for a guy who was with me when at that San Antonio Rodeo, when I cooked by myself. He was there next to me, and I won't go into that long story, but he had actually asked me to cook for the Jack because he got in a pissing match with his cookers over the trophies. Huh. And so I cooked the Jack with him. And so then he asked me to cook the Houston Rodeo. So I cooked the Houston Rodeo, and I got, I don't know, it's like 30th in brisket or something like that. And he goes, okay, I'll give you one more year. So that next year I cooked on a Traeger and won. Yeah. So yeah, oh yeah, no, it's one of those deals. And I said, that's fine. I'll do one more year. And I cooked chicken and then wound up winning. I beat Darren Worth by like 0.2 points, the GOAT in my book, but beat him in chicken. And so then that's when Traeger took notice of me. They used my name on the press release for the American Royal. Went up and cooked the American Royal, got the top Traeger cooker up there, one of their awards, and then went to the Jack and got first in Chef's Choice in cooking steak and potatoes. We did it, and we put it on a $1 plate that my wife got at the dollar store.
Nice.
So, but anyway, so we got first place. I mean, we weren't even paying attention. It was one of those times, where they call the team name a couple of times. We're like, what, us? We weren't even paying attention. So, but it was, yeah. So then after that happened, Traeger said, okay, we're going to get a consulting arrangement with you and, get you here to teach classes and do events and stuff like that. So that's when the relationship started with Traeger. So that would have been fall of 2015. And then, of course, my first exposure to you was right after the Houston Rodeo. That was probably end of February, beginning of March, sort of time frame when I interviewed with you after that, and that was during the time when you were trying to get into Texas. You were trying to break away a little more from the the NBN and Florida and KCBS stuff. So it kind of coincided with your goals that year. So that's when I came on board with you as well. So I was on board with you, and then Head Country probably brought me on the year after. And I've used Head Country since day one. My friend Willie Dillon introduced it to me back in 2008 when I started, doing, some barrel cooking and stuff. And I've used it ever since, all the time.
Where did you make the change from aerospace engineer into what you're doing now, and why?
Yeah, I was, I'd kind of transitioned. I got my professional engineering designation and stuff, and so, and I still keep that because that was too damn hard to get. But I was at a different job, and you know the difference between sales and marketing. Right?
Yeah.
it's two ends of the same string is the way I like to think of it. Right. You know, you're both attached, but you've got different, you know, you're moving together. But all right. So my job, they said they were going to increase my marketing budget by 100%. And they were going to also increase my sales budget by 100%. You know, and I had international distributors in Germany, Japan, Korea, and, you know, and Italy. And I'm like, I'm trying to break into the FDA. You know, I'm just trying to get our software approved by the FDA. I'm like, just because you're going to spend 100% more on marketing, which wasn't much at all anyway, you know, maybe it went from 20,000 to 40,000. And I'm like, that's not the way it's going to work. I'm not going to increase my sales from 4 million to 8 million, you know, or whatever it was at the time. And so I knew, and I argued with them for many months, and they weren't budging on this. And so I was looking to do something different. And then a guy that worked for me in Houston when I was at that small company that I grew from 3 to 19, we had a Houston office. And so he was my head software sales guy over there. He had been looking to do something with me. And so he called on this business broker. He worked for LexisNexis, if you've heard of LexisNexis, information gathering. Yep. Yeah, so he was in sales for LexisNexis. He called on corporate 500 companies. Basically, when they wanted to go acquire they used LexisNexis to find the litigious nature and, you know, the size and all this stuff. And so he called on a business broker, and he's like, "Hey, this sounds interesting. You know, I can't believe this is legal." And I liked it because it was a variety thing. You know, I like variety. I don't like to do the same thing. And that's kind of what I found out in the engineering world, is kind of doing the same thing and stuff. Even though I liked it, I was in front of the computer. I wasn't, you know, talking to people and stuff. And so he basically said, "Hey, let's start this business brokerage." So we started a business brokerage in 2005 together. He moved from Houston over here, and then we started it together. And then we were actually part of a franchise, and we got certified right away. And you know, you have to be a year and get some transactions under your belt. And, you know, it's basically it's a eat what you kill. You know, if it's commission only. So we did make money the first 8 or 9 months or so after starting the business. And, you know, we invested about 100,000 in it, and, you know, 50 each, and you know, didn't make any money the first year for the most part. And so, but and it's a high turnover industry. About a third of the people turn over every year, because, you know, not everyone can survive a year without making any income.
Yeah. I don't know anybody that can survive a year without making any income, to be honest.
Well, these days it's kind of true. You got to be younger, right? So, but
got to be used to having nothing.
Yeah. So anyway, right. Yeah. So, but anyway, so yeah. So, you know, we've done pretty well, and so we do that, and I do equipment appraisals as well. We have another company that does equipment appraisals that's kind of technical in nature. So you have to have, you know, some technical knowledge of equipment and stuff. And so that's kind of where I keep my technical juices flowing.
Do you think, or do you have any desire to do a barbecue job full time? For instance, you see like Chad Ward or Diva Q. There's a handful of others that have managed to make barbecue full time. Is it something that if it presented itself, you would look at, or would that ruin something?
I've talked to Chad about doing that, because, you know, there's been several times where we've been kind of at the end of our, you know, we've had $200 in the, you know, the corporate bank account, and we weren't sure, you know, if we were going to be able to make rent next month and stuff. And, but, you know, that's come to pass about 2 or 3 times. And I don't think I want to travel that much. Number one, you know, I think there would be a position with Traeger, you know, whether it's even on the engineering side, or, you know, to help them with those sorts of things, and, you know, and do events or et cetera. But, you know, as we've talked about, it would turn a passion into work. Yeah. And just like you said, it would change your mindset. Right now it's fun. I develop recipes for Traeger, you know, Head Country. And so it's a lot of fun. It would change it. Plus I'd have to be on the road. You know, before the COVID, I'd have to be on the road. Heck, last year we did 27 weekends of barbecue.
Yeah.
27. And I don't even cook that often. And, let's say I cook 12 to 15. So there's 12 to 15 plus another, 12 or 13, 14, 15 with Traeger events, training classes. I did, I think 10 classes last year.
Yeah.
So
and you're in half a year at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's, it's taken on a life of its own. Every year it's different and it's great, from the standpoint of, the exposure of what I get. And I do truly appreciate you bringing me on and interviewing me and, being the first correspondent and stuff like that. That's been great. And it's been more notoriety than, because I meet people like I met Craig Hansen of Ace at the MBBQA where you went to. And he's like, oh, I know you from the Barbecue Central show. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. So, that happens more often than you think when you go to those type of events and stuff. So, but so it's been a lot of fun and but I still make a good living doing my business brokerage.
Yep. This is Doug Scheiding. He's the longest running embedded correspondent right there in Texas and contracting with Traeger, doing work with Head Country. I mean, what a story he has to tell here, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. Doug, I really appreciate you coming on and talking all about it from beginning to where we're at today. And, of course, like I've told everybody else, we've been chopping it up in some form or fashion here over the last, 5-6 years. And, you really anchoring the embedded correspondence portion has been really mission critical and not only getting that segment started, but really growing it into the successful segments that it has become, over the last handful of years. It's something that all the listeners look forward to and getting a different perspective from somebody that's in the industry in a different way than me. It's unbelievable. Whether you like hot dogs or not, totally irrelevant.
Don't.
Whether they touch your grills or not, totally irrelevant. Whether you hate kids or not, totally irrelevant. Whatever.
No.
That's fine. But, you have really been a great relationship of mine, both on the internet and off the internet, and truly grateful for everything that you've done for me and the show and outside of the show as well. So I just wanted to tell you that and look forward to chopping it up again with you next month.
Absolutely. And I truly appreciate it. It's helped me open up a lot of doors being a barbecue correspondent for this, Barbecue Central show. And so it's been great. And so I love the group that we have now. And I think we have good chemistry and stuff. So I'm really excited about going forward with it too. And continuing.
Doug, thanks again so much.
You bet. Thank you.
There he is, Doug Scheiding from Rogue Cookers. And that is Doug's origin story. Is that enough for you? We're going on 3 hours and 16 minutes worth of shows right here. They'll all be chopped up at podcast. Derek Riches will be first up on Wednesday, but by the time you're hearing this, it will already have come to pass. So thanks again to everybody that stopped through the show this evening. Actually, yesterday, as we close it out here, 16 minutes past a new day on Wednesday. All the way back in the first hour, we thank Derek Riches from DerekRiches.com. Rusty Monson started out that second hour and brought us through to the third. He is the pitmaster of Salt City Barbecue. Look for his food truck when it launches here, whenever this COVID crap stops, and he can take his necessary tests and get rocking and rolling. Great origin story from Rusty. Appreciate his sharing. And, of course, closing it out with Doug Scheiding from Rogue Cookers, longest-running embedded correspondent out of Texas. What a story he has to weave. Wow. Unbelievable. As we are closing out the month of origin stories, and as I go back and listen, once we started getting through, a good handful of these, I've come to find out that the embedded correspondents and the show regulars are connected in many more ways than I even realized. Bringing that whole small world thing to the forefront once again. Hope everybody enjoyed this past month of Origin Stories. They were absolutely fabulous. Lots of great feedback, so we'll see how these might continue as bonus content into the future. But we're locked and loaded with a new month of shows coming up with Malcolm Reed and Sam the Cooking Guy next Tuesday. We're actually all locked up for the whole month of November, believe it or not. Until next Tuesday, let me say this, September 11th, 2001, I will never forget. Until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Good night now.
This is Dino Dan from Cypress, California, and you're watching the BBQ Central Show.